Right, here we go. Intro to climate change. We are going to watch a short video to sort of get us in the right frame of mind really quick before we get into the rest of the slides.
Human activities, from pollution to overpopulation, are driving up the Earth's temperature and fundamentally changing the world around us. The main cause is a phenomenon known as the greenhouse effect. Gases in the atmosphere, such as water vapor, carbon dioxide, methane, nitrous oxide, and chlorofluorocarbons, let the sun's light in, but keep some of the heat from escaping, like the glass walls of a greenhouse. The more greenhouse gases in the atmosphere, the more heat gets trapped, strengthening the greenhouse effect and increasing the Earth's temperature. Human activities, like the burning of fossil fuels, have increased the amount of CO2 in the atmosphere by more than a third since the Industrial Revolution. The rapid increase in greenhouse gases in the atmosphere has warmed the planet at an alarming rate. While Earth's climate has fluctuated in the past, atmospheric carbon dioxide hasn't reached today's levels in hundreds of thousands of years. Climate change has consequences for our oceans, our weather, our food sources, and our health. Ice sheets, such as Greenland and Antarctica, are melting. The extra water that was once held in glaciers causes sea levels to rise and spills out of the oceans, flooding coastal regions. Warmer temperatures also make weather more extreme. This means not only more intense major storms, floods, and heavy snowfall, but also longer and more frequent droughts. These changes in weather pose challenges. Growing crops becomes more difficult. The areas where plants and animals can live shift, and water supplies are diminished. In addition to creating new agricultural challenges, climate change can directly affect people's physical health. In urban areas, the warmer atmosphere creates an environment that traps and increases the amount of smog. This is because smog contains ozone particles, which increase rapidly at higher temperatures. Exposure to higher levels of smog can cause health problems such as asthma, heart disease, and lung cancer. While the rapid rate of climate change is caused by humans, humans are also the ones who can combat it. If we work to replace fossil fuels with renewable energy sources like solar and wind, which don't produce greenhouse gas emissions, we might still be able to prevent some of the worst effects of climate change.
All right, so that was just a brief overview, getting us in the right frame of mind here. All right, so we did talk about climate when we were learning about biomes and climatograms, and there were two things that we needed to know to determine the climate of a particular biome. We needed the average temperature and the average precipitation. But if we're talking about Earth as a whole planet, entire global climate, we can't really use those two pieces of information because varying biomes, varying latitudes, places on Earth are going to have differing temperatures and precipitation. So not a great measure for Earth as a whole planet when it comes to climate. So instead, we look at these other two things: the amount of solar radiation we get from the sun, whether that's heat energy, UV radiation, light, infrared radiation, whatever it is that we're getting from the sun, and that greenhouse effect that was mentioned in the video. As a reminder, next time we meet, we will be talking a little bit more in depth about the greenhouse effect. All of these changes over time, how the solar radiation and the greenhouse effect, will cause our climate to fluctuate. This is why in our historical record we've seen things like ice ages and warming periods. It's a natural thing that happens. We can see that it's happening based on our fossil record. If you remember all of those mass extinctions, a decent number of them were caused by climate change. But in our case, where we are right now in our climate change crisis, it's happening so much faster than it has in the past. It's just happening super duper fast. And why? Us humans, we are the main cause of this rapid climate change. We are increasing the amount of greenhouse gases in the atmosphere due to all of our activities and all of our choices that we're making. Humans are just garbage. We are terrible. We're treating the earth just in the least respectful way possible. In short, it's getting kind of hot. So here is a historical carbon dioxide graph. Up until very recently, we never had more than 300 parts per million of carbon dioxide in our atmosphere. As you can see, we had ups and downs. We had some fluctuations going on here. But when we get to our current time, it is just skyrocketing. It's going almost off the chart high here. It's about 400 parts per million. That's an insane amount compared to, it's like almost 100 more parts per million than the past most highest carbon dioxide level. So we are just ramping it up, not doing anything good with this. Great, we know the problem. We have too many greenhouse gases. How do we fix it? So all organisms on Earth are being and will be affected by global climate change. We are the ones who are doing it, so we need to be the ones who fix it. It's not up to that whale in the ocean. It's not up to that bug in a bush. We're the problem. We need to fix it. So some steps that we've already taken are something like the UN Climate Change Conference. This happens every year, and it's been going on since 1995. At these conferences, different nations are making agreements to reduce those greenhouse gases. Some notable pieces of legislation, I guess not technical legislation, agreements and protocols. The first one that was adopted was called the Kyoto Protocol, and that happened in 1997, so fairly early on in the lifespan of this climate change conference. Next, the most recent one is the Paris Agreement that happened in 2015. Yes, this is the one that was in the news. It's the one that Trump refused to sign. It was a whole big deal. Since Biden has been elected and taken office, we have, as a nation of America, we've signed it, and we are, on the Paris Agreement, and we're now taking steps to meet those goals, I guess you could say. An important note about these agreements and protocols is that they are pledges, they're promises, they're not actually legally binding. Essentially what it is, okay, my nation pledges to reduce our emissions by this much by this time, this year, whatever. Because it's more of like a promise, we can't take legal action. So one nation cannot sue another nation because they didn't meet their goal or whatever. But it's a step in the right direction. We're acknowledging that this is an issue. We need to start making steps to fix it. All right, so we're getting too hot too fast. How do we slow it down? Well, we need to look at the things that affect and contribute to Earth's climate. Solar radiation was the first thing. We can't do too much in terms of solar radiation. We can't control how much the sun shines on us. But the thing we can really focus and control are those greenhouse gas emissions. This is something that humans are really, really affecting a lot. All of our activities are just really increasing those greenhouse gases. So there are 5 main greenhouse gases that we're going to focus on: water vapor, carbon dioxide, methane, nitrous oxide, and chlorofluorocarbons, also known as CFCs, because that's a mouthful. You may have heard of CFCs. They're a type of propellant found in many aerosolized products. Since it was found that CFCs are destroying the ozone, a lot of companies have sort of shifted away from CFCs into more natural propellants. So yeah. Yes, the ozone layer, the ozone hole was actually starting to close, which is fantastic. And COVID was a great help in that because people started to stay home. But yeah, awesome. Thank you for that. Greenhouse gases, they act as sort of a blanket. They trap in that infrared or heat energy from the sun. So the sun shines in, and the heat from that gets trapped by those greenhouse gases. It forms a little blanket around our Earth, makes it a habitable place. greenhouse gases do occur naturally. They are necessary to create a planet where life can exist. Humans have not been around since the beginning of Earth, so obviously they had to come from somewhere naturally. Some of those sources include volcanoes. Volcanoes, when they erupt and spew stuff, they give us water vapor and carbon dioxide, a bunch of other stuff, little particles and other things. But the main things that they spew in terms of greenhouse gases are that water vapor and carbon dioxide. Another natural source is plant and animal respiration and decomposition. Plants respirate, animals respirate. When plants photosynthesize, they release some water vapor through their stoma. When we are animals who undergo aerobic respiration. When we breathe out, we release water vapor and carbon dioxide as well. So there are those, natural occurrences and sources of greenhouse gases. The last one I want to bring to attention is methane. Methane comes from a couple different sources naturally. Animals, whenever we fart, that's methane. That's what makes it smell bad. And decomposition, when things start to break down and decompose, one of those products is methane. That's why things that are starting to rot smell bad. One of those things is methane that smells bad. Even though they are occurring naturally, like I said, humans are really adding a lot here. And some of those anthropogenic resources are those that follow. Whenever you see the term anthropogenic, that means human related. So if you, when you go off to college or whatever and you take a course in anthropology, that's the study of humans. So you kind of look at the history of humans. So some anthropogenic sources that I want to point out are things like agriculture. Whenever we need to, do some farming, we need really big tools and vehicles to do so. How do we power them? More often than not, fossil fuels. Power. Whatever power plant, most power plants are actually using fossil fuels, whether that's burning coal. If we want to power things like our cars, we need to use gasoline, which is also a fossil fuel, unless you're one of those people who can afford an all-electric car. But most cars run on gasoline. Another thing to keep in mind is industrialization. Whenever we need a factory or something that is a place of production, there's going to be some sort of waste, and oftentimes that's atmospheric waste, and they'll have smokestacks and things like that, just spewing a bunch of stuff up into the air. Waste disposal and treatment. This goes for both like things like refuse or garbage. Where are we putting our trash? Are we putting it in a landfill? Are we burning it? What are we doing with it? Many places just burn it to get rid of it, and all of that just goes straight up into the air. It also goes for things like biological waste. What are we doing with that? How do we treat it in a way that can help reduce those emissions? Lastly, I want to talk about land use and biomass burning. We see a lot of this in at the moment as we speak in Brazil, in the Amazon forest. What they're doing is they're clearing vast tracts of this rainforest that's highly diverse, got tons and tons of plants and animals, and they're clearing it out by burning it. They're slash and burning. They're cutting everything down and then burning it to get rid of it, because once you cut down a tree, what are you supposed to do with it? If we have like an entire square mile of trees, that's a lot of wood. Best and easiest way to get rid of it is just to burn it. Now, when we burn things, all organic, all things organic have carbon in them. So already we got carbon there. But then when we burn it, going up in the air. Here is a neat little GIF I found of the general warming of the Earth since the 1800s through 2018. It's fascinating to watch. It's fairly blue, and then it gets a little more yellow and a little more yellow, and then in the 90s we hit orange, and in our more recent years we're hitting even red. It's just going so fast. It's crazy. But as you can see, like generally, we're increasing that. There's a little scale up here in the top corner. 4 degrees Fahrenheit for the northern areas, super duper hot, as like a general temperature over a wide area. All right, there are some predictions that indicate we could see an increase in temperatures of up to 3 to 4 degrees Celsius. Now, that may not seem like a lot. Day to day, we have our highs and low temperatures. There are way more than 3 to 4 degrees. However, if everything shifts up 3 to 4 degrees Celsius, that's really significant. So why does it matter that our world is getting warmer? Well, like in the video, I talked about glaciers and sea ice. When we have solid water, it's ice, it's going to float. Ice is less dense than water. And so what happens is that goes into a solid state, and that's not liquid water out in the oceans. But as they melt, that liquid water starts to go out, and we see an increase and a rise in sea levels. So all those people, plants, animals that live on coastal areas, they're going to see an increase in sea levels, meaning they have to retreat farther and farther inland to avoid flooding. Another important thing I want to point out about glaciers and sea ice is a reduction in albedo. If you're an ape, you should be pretty familiar with this term, but what albedo means is it's a measure of reflection. So something with a high albedo reflects a lot of light. Something with a low albedo absorbs a lot of light. So we think about ice and glaciers. Generally speaking, they're pretty white. They're very, very light colored. So they would have a high albedo that would reflect a lot of that sun. Oceans and land masses are generally darker in color and have a lower albedo. Well, if we have less reflection and more absorption, we're going to get warmer. Because of this reduction in albedo and the general, warming of the globe, we're going to see a rise in ocean temperatures. We need to think about the specific heat of water. It is a very, very high specific heat. That means it's going to take a lot of energy to change the temperature. Once we get a warmer and warmer ocean, it's going to take more and more energy to cool it back down to previous temperatures. We're also going to see a rise in humidity. As things get warmer and warmer, that band at the equator of tropics is going to expand more and more and more. What do we relate with tropics? Well, warm temperatures, and it's wet. We're going to have a lot more of that water vapor in the air, giving us that muggy, gross feeling of humidity. Also, land temperatures will rise. Kind of makes sense. If everything's getting warmer, the land temperatures will get warmer as well. Last little bit. All of these rapid changes will make weather more severe and extreme. They mentioned it in the video as well. For us here in Southern California, the main thing we're going to worry about are those harsher and longer droughts. We're not going to have as much precipitation. We're going to have, all of these really dry areas, and that can lead to more wildfires. As Californians, we are well aware of our more new season of the year, fire season, and this is due to climate change. We're not getting the precipitation we need, so all of these areas are getting really, really dry, and all it takes is a spark and boom, wildfire, it's out of control. Droughts will also lead to a decrease in agricultural yields. Also makes sense. If we don't have enough water, we can't water all of the food, whether that's plant or livestock. And if we can't water all the food, we're going to have a food shortage. We're going to have bigger, stronger, and more frequent hurricanes and tornadoes. Hurricanes are tropical storms. And if our band in terms of latitude increases when we're looking at tropical weather, we're going to get more hurricanes in places where they've never been before. So I don't remember which one it was, but there was a hurricane that made it all the way up to New York. New York is generally a pretty cool place. I wouldn't consider New York tropical in any sense, but they got a hurricane and it wiped them out. I think it was Hurricane Sandy. Also tornadoes. Tornadoes are caused by a change in when two very different temperatures and air pressure systems collide. Well, if we have a lot more warm fronts coming, that'll change air pressure and we'll get more tornadoes, which are very, very destructive. We'll see harsher winters, hotter summers. I can already tell the difference from when I was a kid growing up here and how things are now. I did live in the Bay for about 10 years, so I was kind of removed from Southern California. But when I moved back, there was a very, very clear difference from what I grew up with and what I'm experiencing now. When I was growing up, the average, high of the summer, like a really, really hot summer day would be like mid-90s. Now, mid-90s is basically like every summer day. That's like pretty normal. and the highs are getting up into the more in the 100s. So we're seeing a lot hotter summers here in Southern California. In places like Canada, they're seeing the opposite effect. Their winters are getting a lot colder and a lot worse for them. And since our winters and summers are getting longer, that means we're going to have shorter fall and spring seasons. I think, the last few years, maybe even longer, summers have been getting extended into like November. It's hot into November. That's crazy. November is the end of fall. It's almost winter time. So we're actually seeing a lot of this stuff happen around us today. Last little point is we can see more widespread diseases. Warmer climates are better for viruses and bacteria and all that stuff. They thrive in warmer climates. The other thing I want to note is mosquito spread diseases. Mosquitoes prefer like warm and wet, humid weather. And if we're seeing more and more places with warm and wet weather, we're going to see more mosquitoes, which mean more mosquito spread diseases. We could even see things like malaria and yellow fever in places where it's never been present before because of this global climate change. Crazy, crazy, crazy. Intense, scary stuff. All right, that's all I got for you. Any comments, questions, concerns, or clarifications? Do I need to go back for notes?